And Io Wilson's name isn't just on jerseys. It's on the front line of a growing divide in women's basketball. While the league's brightest stars fight for recognition, Project B is rewriting the rules of the game with billion-dollar offers at zero and on Caitlin Clark. The disparity is striking. Clark is being handed the keys to a new basketball empire, while veterans like Wilson and match photos, Angel rewatch from the sidelines. Tension is rising, not just over contracts, but over what this shift says about loyalty, respect, and who gets to lead the future of the sport. The locker room isn't just divided, it's destabilizing.
If you're here for the real story and not the filtered version, subscribe. And if you're sticking around for the next meltdown, you better definitely subscribe.
What's at stake isn't just one player's decision, but the foundation of the WNBA itself. Clark's marketability has become a weapon, leveraged by Project B to shake up the structure of women's basketball. Her injury once dropped viewership by more than half, a number that tells you everything about her influence. If she walks, the ripple effect could upend not only league revenue and morale, but the very narrative of women's sports ownership and authenticity. This isn't just about money. It's about who gets to shape the sport's future, and at what cost. Io Wilson suspended after a blow-up with teammates, while Caitlin Clark gets billion-dollar offers to leave the WNBA. Yeah, women's basketball is spiraling into an off-court mess that no one saw coming, and the timing couldn't be more chaotic. Welcome to Project B Problem, a new, shadowy basketball league reportedly backed by Saudi money, dangling billions in front of Caitlin Clark's face. Not millions, billions. And if you think this is just some harmless overseas side hustle, think again. This isn't just about one player or one paycheck. This could flip the entire future of women's basketball upside down. And here's the kicker. It's not just about money. It's about power, influence, legitimacy, and yes, ethics. Caitlin Clark is being offered more for one season in this mysterious new league than her entire WNBA career could give her. We're talking base salaries around $2 million, with even more sweeteners attached. That kind of cash doesn't just make headlines. It rewrites the rule book, and Project B knows exactly what it's doing. Because let's be real, if you're trying to build a rival league out of nowhere, there's only one way to make people care. Steal the face of the game, and Caitlin Clark is the face. Period. When she got injured recently, WNBA viewership nosedived by 55%. That's not just bad luck. That's a red flag. It shows how fragile the WNBA success is right now, how heavily it leans on Clark's marketability. And that's exactly what Project B is banking on. By locking her down with this kind of eye-watering offer, they're not just signing a player. They're buying a spotlight, a headline, a whole audience. And if you're wondering who's writing those checks, the answer comes with a whole lot of baggage. Because Project B isn't some indie startup founded by hoop-loving billionaires. It's reportedly backed by Saudi Arabia. That's right, the same Saudi Arabia infamous for its restrictive policies on women's rights. The same country accused of using global sports to launder its image through a little strategy called sports washing. So now the question isn't just, will Caitlin take the money? It's, what does it mean if she does? It's the kind of moral dilemma that could define an entire era of women's sports. On one hand, these athletes, especially women, have fought for decades to be fairly compensated. Now they're finally being offered life-changing money. On the other, the source of that money raises some pretty uncomfortable questions. What do you stand for when the check is that big? And what are fans supposed to think? This isn't just a Caitlin Clark problem. It's a WNBA problem. Because if Clark leaves, the dam might break. Project B isn't just waving cash at the top-tier stars. They're reportedly offering $2 million base salaries to mid-tier players. That's game over for the WNBA's pay structure. No one's going to stick around for a tenth of the paycheck, especially not when the league has been slow to protect and promote its own talent. And speaking of talent, let's talk about Io Wilson, one of the WNBA's brightest stars. Champion, MVP, fan favorite, and now reportedly suspended after a heated incident with teammates. That tension? It's not just about emotions boiling over in the locker room. It's about something deeper. Because when you're a star like Wilson and you're watching all this attention and money get funneled to one player while you're left holding the league together, it starts to sting. Project B isn't offering her $1 billion deal. They're not rolling out the red carpet either. They want Clark, and they want her bad. The message is clear. Some players are more valuable than others, not just on the court, but off it in the eyes of sponsors, in the eyes of networks, in the eyes of billionaires with geopolitical agendas. That kind of disparity is bound to fracture any league. Because how do you ask players to stay loyal to a system that isn't loyal to them, especially when the next offer might come with a jet, a mansion, and more zeros than their entire career has seen? Project B is being clever. The league isn't trying to go head-to-head with the WNBA, at least not yet. It plans to launch with just 6 teams during the WNBA offseason. That way, it flies under the radar, avoids direct conflict, and lures talent without triggering full-on war. But let's be honest, this is a Trojan horse. If Project B succeeds in signing someone like Clark, it will start as a complement to the WNBA and end as a replacement. Why would fans stick around for a gutted league when all the action and all the stars are somewhere else? The WNBA's entire model is suddenly in jeopardy. This isn't just a talent drain. It's a legitimacy crisis. The league has always fought an uphill battle for attention, revenue, and respect. Losing its biggest draw to a Saudi-funded league could push it over the edge. And here's the part that stings. Project B knows this. It's not just throwing money around. It's playing chess. The goal isn't to build a scrappy little alternative. It's to become the league, the one with the biggest names, the biggest paychecks, and the biggest spotlight. And right now, Clark is a queen on that board. But here's where it gets even more complicated. Clark still has time. The league is set to launch in 2026, which gives her a full season to watch, wait, and decide. And that gives the WNBA one last shot to prove itself. Can it protect her? Can it market her without alienating its other stars? Can it raise salaries and meet the moment before it's too late? That's the tension hanging in the air right now. And it's a dangerous one. Because let's say Clark does take the deal. What happens next? Do other players follow? Does the WNBA collapse into a feeder league? Or does it double down, try to compete, and spark a bidding war that could finally bring the salaries in women's sports where they should have been all along? Or, here's the uncomfortable option. Does it all backfire? Do fans tune out, alienated by the politics, the optics, the foreign funding, and the broken promises? Does the league fracture? Does the dream unravel? And underneath it all, the ethics. The very real discomfort of watching a regime with a documented history of oppressing women use women's sports to burnish its image. The idea that money, big enough, shiny enough, can make us all forget what's behind the curtain. This is the moment when women's basketball stops being just a game and becomes a battlefield. Close face, a battle over money, morality, media power, and marketability. A battle where one player's decision could tilt the entire board. And don't get it twisted. Clark's not the villain here. She didn't create this imbalance. She didn't underpay herself. She didn't bring the Saudis to the table. She's just the biggest prize and the one holding all the cards. The question now is, how does the WNBA respond? Because if they don't act fast, they won't just lose Clark. They'll lose the trust of the players who didn't get billion-dollar offers. The ones still grinding. The ones feeling overlooked, underpaid, and now overshadowed. And if that locker room tension is already boiling over into suspensions, like Aya Wilson's, it's a sign that things are breaking. Fast. Whether Project B succeeds or not, the damage is already being done. The questions are out there. The comparisons are inevitable. The dollars are on the table. And there's no going back. So where does that leave us? 2. Right at the edge of a new era in women's basketball, one where the stakes are higher, the lines are blurrier, and the consequences are real. Because this isn't just a bidding war. It's a referendum on what women's sports can be, and who gets to own the future. If you got thoughts, and we know you do, drop them in the comments. Would you take the Project B deal if you were Clark? Does the source of the money matter? And what should the WNBA be doing right now to keep the league alive? Like, Share, subscribe, because the story isn't over. And the next chapter? It's going to be wild. Because here's the truth most people don't want to say out loud. If Caitlin Clark takes this deal, she's not just chasing a paycheck. She's becoming the centerpiece of a global strategy. She stops being just an athlete and starts being a symbol. And that's the part that makes everyone uncomfortable. Because when billions are on the table, nothing stays simple. You think it's just about basketball? It's never just about basketball. Not when Saudi Arabia is involved. Not when there's a larger agenda to rebrand an entire country, using world-class athletes and shiny sports leagues as a face of progress. Look at what happened in golf. Look at the money dumped into LIV. People laughed at first, said it wouldn't last, said athletes wouldn't bite. And then, the checks cleared. Careers shifted. Public narratives changed. Match photos, and now the same playbook is being run in women's basketball. But here's where things get twisted. This time, it's hitting one of the few professional women's leagues that's still standing. The WNBA doesn't have the buffer of billion-dollar broadcast deals like the NBA or NFL. It's still climbing that mountain, year by year, player by player. It doesn't have the luxury of losing its biggest asset. Caitlin Clark isn't just a rising star. She is the moment, the stats, the highlights, the energy. She brought an entire new audience to the sport. She moved merch. She drove ratings. She packed arenas. And now she's being asked, indirectly, maybe even silently, to choose between being a legend in the WNBA or becoming a billionaire icon in a brand new league built around her. And that decision, it's going to define everything. Let's not forget the ripple effects. If she walks, it tells every young player coming up, loyalty is optional. League identity is temporary. If the money is right, you bounce. That's not a criticism. It's just a new reality. But it does blow a hole in the culture the WNBA has worked for years to build. Because this league has always leaned on its stars to be more than athletes, activists, leaders, foundational pillars. The players weren't just hoopers. They were part of something bigger. And now they're being forced to ask themselves, does that still matter if the league can't keep up financially? Does your loyalty pay the bills when a rival league is offering 10x the salary? The tension in the locker room is real. Players like Aya Wilson have been carrying this league for years, winning titles, putting up MVP numbers, doing the press rounds, building the brand. And now they're seeing the cameras shift. The dollars follow the hype. And the hype? It's all on Clark. It's not jealousy. It's resentment built on imbalance. Because how can a league survive when only one player is treated like the future? And Project B knows that, too. That's why they're not offering everyone billion-dollar deals. That's why they're zeroing in on Clark. She's a Trojan horse. If they can get her, they don't need the rest, yet. Once she signs, the cameras come. The sponsors come. The media starts asking questions. The WNBA gets nervous. And before you know it, other players follow. Not because they want to betray the league, but because they finally see their worth in hard numbers. Think about it. How long have WNBA players had to fly commercial for away games? How many times have they been forced to play back-to-back with zero recovery? How often have they begged for better pay, better conditions, and actual protection, especially from a media circus that's erupted around Clark? And now a new league swoops in with first-class flights, luxury accommodations, guaranteed millions and global exposure? That's not just tempting. That's a lifeline. But it's a lifeline tied to a regime with deep, ongoing issues around women's rights. That's the trap. The money's great. But where is it coming from? And what does it mean to be the face of that league? For some fans, it's already a line too far. They're not okay with Saudi money being the engine behind a women's sports revolution, especially when it's coming from a place where women can't even move freely without a male guardian's permission. That disconnect is jarring, ironic, even, and it begs the question, is this empowerment or is it propaganda? And Caitlin Clark? She's right in the middle of it, which, by the way, puts even more pressure on her. She's not just deciding her own future. She's deciding the future of an entire league, of other players, of fans, of how women's sports will be seen and funded for the next generation. It's an impossible situation. No matter what she does, there will be backlash. If she stays, some will say she left millions on the table and played it safe. If she leaves, others will say she sold out, took blood money, walked away from the league that built her, and undermined everything the WNBA stands for. Injury too in the league, it's not helping itself right now. Because while this drama plays out, it's failing to protect the very player it's most reliant on. Clark has already been injured, and that single moment caused a 55% drop in viewership. That stat alone should have been a wake-up call. It should have sparked a league-wide sprint to protect her at all costs. But instead, the silence is loud. Where's the response? Where's the plan to keep her healthy, happy, and safe? Where's the marketing that doesn't throw every other star under the bus? The imbalance is becoming unsustainable. You can't build a league on one player, treat her like a golden ticket, and expect everyone else to play nice, especially when the players carrying the weight are being offered scraps in comparison. Angel Reese, Aya Wilson, other top-tier talents. They deserve more and they know it. But Project B doesn't want a fair fight. They want a headline-stealing heist. And Clark? She's a jackpot. If she says yes, the dominoes fall. Quickly. And here's the part nobody's prepared for. The shift won't be subtle. It'll be seismic. Ratings, sponsorships, media attention. It'll all move with her. And the WNBA, already struggling to keep pace, will be left scrambling to rebuild from a loss it might not survive. Speaks. Because what do you tell fans when your biggest star walks out? What do you tell sponsors? What do you tell the players who stayed? This is the power of a single decision. And the pressure on Clark isn't fair, but it's real. The ball is in her court, but the whole world is watching. So yeah, Aya Wilson's suspension is shocking, but it's also a symptom, a sign that something deeper is breaking, that the unity the WNBA was known for is starting to crack under the weight of unfair deals, unequal attention, and unanswered questions. This is about more than one player, more than one league. It's about whether women's sports will be built by the people who fought for it, or bought out by the highest bidder with the cleanest logo and the messiest track record. CC Caitlin Clark. It's about what happens when money, morality, and movement collide on the same court. And Caitlin Clark? She's not just a star. She's a spark. Because the more you look at this, the more it stops being about Caitlin Clark versus the WNBA, and starts being about a system that's run out of time. The WNBA has always been in survival mode, fighting for airtime, fighting for pay, fighting for respect. And through all of that, it built something real, something powerful, a league where players weren't just athletes, but advocates, where identity, activism, and performance were all part of the package. But now, that foundation is being tested in the most brutal, high-stakes way possible, not by an internal scandal, not by poor performance, but by money, so much of it that even the most principled players would have to stop and think. And the timing couldn't be worse. Aya Wilson's reported suspension? That's not just locker room drama. That's the tension exploding. When players start clashing behind the scenes, and it makes headlines, it means the pressure is already breaking through the walls. It's not just about the game anymore. It's about inequality, resentment, and the fear that some players are being left behind while one is being catapulted into superstardom on and off the court. And it's not Clark's fault. That part's critical. She didn't ask to be the centerpiece of this new Saudi-funded project. She didn't demand the league pour every bit of marketing into her image. But she's at the center anyway, because her success is a lightning rod for everything the WNBA has both built and failed to build. If she stays, she keeps the league's pulse going. If she leaves, she exposes just how fragile that pulse really is. Because let's be real, if your league's existence is that dependent on a single player, the problem didn't start with her. The infrastructure should have been stronger. The salaries should have been higher. The players should have been protected. Not just physically, but professionally. And now that someone else is offering everything the WNBA should have, everyone's scrambling. Project B isn't going to wait for the WNBA to catch up. They're being methodical. 6 teams. Off-season only play. Big money, low friction. They don't need to beat the WNBA overnight. They just need to exist long enough for players to look around and go, why am I doing twice the work for a tenth of the check? And once that mindset kicks in, the exodus begins. What happens when other players, especially the mid-tier ones who've been grinding for years, start doing the math? They're not millionaires. They're not headline names. But Project B is reportedly ready to offer them $2 million per season. $2 million for players who've maybe never cracked six figures. It's not even a hard choice at that point. It's survival. So no, this isn't some hypothetical. This is a storm that's already forming, and the league knows it. They just don't seem to have a plan. Or at least, not one they're sharing. There have been no bid to address the Saudi rumors. No strong league statement to reassure players. No salary reform announcements. It's been mostly silence, awkward tension, and stories like Io Wilson's suspension, making it painfully clear that inside the WNBA, things are far from okay. And here's where it starts to feel personal. For fans, for players, for anyone who's been following this league for more than 5 minutes. Because it's not just about sports. It's about what happens when you invest in something because you believe in it. When you support a league because it represents progress. When you buy the jerseys, watch the games, argue with trolls on social media. Because women deserve a league that stands tall, pays fair, and doesn't crumble the second a new offer comes through. But now it might crumble. Close face, and the worst part? That collapse won't be caused by poor performance. It'll be caused by a better offer. A more organized plan. A stronger wallet. That's not drama. That's a gut punch. So yeah, everyone's watching Caitlin Clark right now. But maybe they should also be watching the system around her. Because if the WNBA wants to survive this moment, it has to move fast, protect the players, raise the salaries, share the spotlight, give the stars who built this league, like Wilson and Ree, the recognition, respect, and resources they've earned. Because if the only player you support is the one with billion-dollar offers on the table, you've already lost the rest. So where does this end? Does Clark stay and trigger reform from the inside? Does the WNBA finally wake up and fight for its survival? Or does Project B launch, steal the spotlight, and flip the future of women's sports on its head? We're about to find out. And no matter how this plays out, things won't go back to how they were. So tell us, what would you do? Is taking the Project B deal selling out, or leveling up? Can the WNBA recover from this? Or is this the beginning of the end? Let us know in the comments. Like if you're just as stunned as we are, subscribe if you're here for every twist. And don't forget to share, because this conversation is just getting started.